Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Classroom Matters podcast with me, your host, Kristy Houle. And on today's episode, I am super delighted and excited, and all those words I always use, to talk to Mark Milliron. Did I get that right, Mark?
Perfect.
You know, I bet a lot of people say Milliron.
We get Milliron, Millitron, every version you can imagine.
Okay.
The best part is when people correct me around my own name.
So Mark is here, and Mark has 20 plus years of experience, and really in all facets of education. And I'm gonna, that's gonna unfold during our conversation. But I really want to focus today on our conversation with Mark about topics such as preparing new teachers for the classroom, healthcare for teachers, both mental health and physical health, teacher burnout, teacher shortage, and really how can we avoid some of those things before we even get to that point with them. Mark is currently the Senior Vice President of Western Governors University and the Executive Dean of the Teachers College, and he is currently transitioning into a new role as the President and CEO of National University. So Mark, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Glad to join. Thank you for the invitation.
Okay, so let's jump in. First, I want the listeners to get a little bit of background of just who you are, what your background in education is, and the position that you currently hold.
Yeah, so I'm literally in flux between the two. So I'm currently the Senior Vice President and Executive Dean of the School of Education at Western Governors University. That School of Education includes our Teachers College, higher ed programs, and our College of General Education. Combined, the Teachers College probably serves about 35,000 full-time students. The General Education College is one of the most impactful, I think, in the country. It probably touches 70,000 students in a given year. And what's really powerful about that work is Western Governors has really been at the forefront of competency-based and learning-centered education around the country. And their work with the Teachers College for 20 years has been one of the most impactful trainers of teachers, in particular STEM, and the work they've done with special education, the work they've done with initial licensure programming. In a matter of about 10 days, I'll be transitioning over to take over the presidency and CEO position at National University. National University is based in San Diego, but operates all around the country. And they have their Sanford College of Education, which is a really impactful college of education, in particular in California, one of the top provider of teacher training for the entire state. In addition to that, they have higher education programs, leadership programs all across the country. And they also run two big philanthropic programs. One's called Harmony SEL, which does SEL training for teachers all over the country. And then the other is Inspire Teaching and Learning, which is a kind of beginning training program for teachers. So I get to swim in the goodness of a whole lot of people who are trying to make a powerful difference in the world of education. And we know it's a tough time in the space, but we also know there's a whole lot of inspiring work happening all over the country.
Yes. So I want you to go back even further, because now that our listeners know what you currently do, how did you get into education? Like, go way back. We're talking like high school, college. Like, what was that journey like for you?
So one of the reasons I work at places like Western Governors University and National University, I'm a big fan of all the Research One universities and state universities and community colleges out there. But the why I work with Access Innovators more exclusively is because I'm a big believer in opening pathways to possibilities through education, helping more and more diverse students be more successful than ever before. I just think education gives people power, gives them choices, opens up possibilities. That commitment comes from kind of my background. I come from a family of 9 kids. I have an African-American brother, a Native American brother, and a Korean sister. In addition to that, we had 25 foster kids who rotated through my house during the time I was growing up. My mom was a special needs nurse, so our foster kids were generally between about newborn and 2 years old, all with special needs. So we always had 1 or 2 in the house at a given time as they kind of rotated through. But there really wasn't any knowing about pathways through education beyond the standard public school. When I started, luckily for me, there was a community college nearby, Mesa Community College in Arizona, and it absolutely was the game changer for me. The right people showed up, faculty members I can name who absolutely changed my life. Bus tables, waited tables, paid my way through community college, transferred to Arizona State, got my bachelor's, got my master's, and went on to get my doctorate at UT Austin. And I was hooked. And along that process, I fell in love with education in general, but teaching in particular, I absolutely fell in love. I began student teaching when I was at Arizona State University, and then I kind of took over courses, and I taught classes as big as 500 students in intro comm to very small classes in organizational leadership or in public speaking. And it was really fun to kind of be a part of that mix and kind of study that. And then I went on to get the doctorate. And in the doctorate, I really studied the impact of how faculty identify with their institutions. And then later ended up writing a book called Practical Magic, which was a national study on teaching excellence. We studied about 2,000 teaching excellence award winners. And that was such a fun study. I didn't want it to stop because being around all these award-winning teachers and faculty members and hearing how they work their magic. We called it practical magic because it really is like brutally practical stuff, but at the same time, they really kind of spark things that are powerful. And when you're around that, you fall in love with it more and more. So because of that, I've held a number of positions since then. I've worked in the philanthropic world. I actually used to run I was deputy director for the Post-Secondary Success Initiative at the Gates Foundation. I currently chair the board of the Trellis Foundation, which is a big access and success innovator in the space. I helped found a big analytics company that really focused on student success in the education space, and I sit on the board of a couple of other companies like Near Peer and Yellow Dig. And then I also got to work in straight in the education space, right? Helping launch WGU Texas when they began their kind of state-based models, and also I've been a faculty member at UT Austin and been a leader at a few other places. But the red thread between, if you go to my LinkedIn, right, the red thread between all those positions is in every one of those positions, the job was, how do we bring all of the skill and will resources here to bear to help more and more diverse students be more successful in the world of education? So the great thing is I've just been blessed to work with some killer people from all kinds of different contexts, whether it's corporate education, nonprofits, and foundations. And there are just literally millions of people who want to help, who want to be a part of this larger process. And that's why the topic we're talking about today, when it comes to teachers are often the beginning spark, right? They're where it starts. And if you can get upstream and make sure those young people are impacted by a skillful and soulful teacher, that foundation is powerful. And you hear about it later when you talk to students.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned a lot of things in that I think are really important to the conversation that we're going to have during this episode. You're talking about teachers being impactful, teachers, having the necessary skills, teachers being innovators, teachers, swimming upstream. Why is it that we're still seeing so many teachers getting burned out at such an early stage in the game? You and I were talking before we started recording about teacher candidates that haven't even really truly started the profession yet and already feeling that sense of pressure or that sense of, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do all of this. So, what are some things that you're seeing that are really sort of rising to the top of those issues that you're hearing about the most?
Yeah. So it's important to put it in context.
Mm-hmm.
Teaching in the public school arena has been tough for a long time. It's not just now. We've had a challenge with recruiting and retaining high quality teachers for decades. And part of the challenge is we just need to do a much better job at promoting the profession, at empowering the profession, and creating the right kind of policy environment so teachers are respected, they're paid well, they're supported well within their larger districts. And those issues aren't new. The pandemic put it on hyperdrive.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened was some of the most vulnerable people on the planet were impacted the most by the pandemic, and in particular, folks who were being served by public schools. Think about all the free and reduced school lunch children that were out there, and the families that really relied on schools for a stable environment and for food for their kids. And you realize that the level of innovation and effort that the school districts had to put in, administrators to teachers to parapros to even the custodians, to figure out like how they could teach and reach the students during that process overwhelming. It really was overwhelming. There's a really powerful book out right now by Anya Komenetz, who's was the NPR education correspondent. It's a book called The Stolen Year. And it's just it really unpacks these issues in a really powerful way. It really helps you understand like we are coming out of something that is almost creating a post-traumatic stress disorder for the teachers and for the reachers who've done this larger work. So I think a long-standing challenge combined with a unique, kind of consequence, and then Kristy, this is where it gets tough. You add politics to it, and suddenly public schools have become political pawns, and just a whole lot of, we were doing a convening on healthy learning, and we consider healthy learning. WGU has been a real champion of this concept, working with HBCUs, HSIs, public schools, community colleges, on creating a healthy learning environment, which is an environment that kind of brings DEI, SEL, basic needs, mental health, thriving all together, and says, how do we braid the efforts together to create a healthy learning environment in these public and in these private access innovator kind of spaces, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in that convening, what was really kind of impactful was listening to the superintendents in particular talk about just how painful it's been to see the bullying behavior happening in their schools. And when I say bullying, I'm not talking about the kids.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the bullying between the adults,
Mm-hmm.
parents bullying teachers, board members bullying the district, the public bullying board members, and just like the kind of lack of civil discourse. It's just made it very hard to operate. And I think all three of those things came together or come together to create kind of a perfect storm.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we have to be careful about is make sure that we're clear eyed about like these are real challenges, right? And we have to go back to root causes, and part of the root cause is we've got to go back to powering the profession and helping people understand how important this role actually is. Continue the fight for the policy and for the pay and for the working conditions and for the just the respect that teachers deserve for the work that they do. They are vital for our economy. They're vital for our healthcare. They're vital for our civil, our whole civic infrastructure. Like, it is incredibly important that great teaching happens early, and we've got to promote the profession to make that happen. And then we just have to lead through what's happening with the pandemic and try to calm the politics down and create more of a safe place for our teachers in doing this larger work. It's not going to be simple, but it's absolutely what we're going to have to do right now to make a difference in this area.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that part of the problem as you're talking, I'm kind of thinking of teachers, right? Like I'm always thinking about the teachers in the classrooms, walking up and down the hallways, whether it's a kindergarten class or a senior class at a high school, middle school, because they're all such different environments. And it's really different how the teachers interact with each other and how the teachers interact with the students and how the teachers interact with administrators, depending on the school climate and culture. And so do you think that sometimes it's disheartening, and this is sort of in the sense of promoting more respect and professionalism to teachers, when teachers that feel like they're really doing the work and they're trying hard and they're doing everything they're supposed to do, and then the teacher down the hallway is certainly not showing up and they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and there's always going to be some employees in a profession that maybe that's not the right path for them, but they're still there, right? And so do you think that sometimes that makes it difficult for those teachers that really want to try?
Yeah. I mean, it's an important question, but it's also a complex answer.
Yes.
Because the having challenges with unevenness in performance is a standard employee issue, not
Yes.
just a teacher issue, right?
Exactly.
I don't care what profession you go into, you definitely have unevenness in performance. And what you often see is that when poor performers aren't there isn't some kind of intervention or kind of like outreach around that, high performers feel like they are not valued. Right. That is not unique to teachers. That is
it's not. It's not. Do you think though it like comes more to the surface because everybody's in teachers' business all the time?
Exactly right. Yeah, no, because they're on stage.
Yes.
They're on stage in a pretty big way. So I just want to predicate that. Secondly, here's where it gets really complex. Trying to extrapolate from individual schoolhouses to the network of thousands of school districts around the country is really tough, because you literally can go 30 miles apart in school districts and find different worlds, right? Where
Yeah.
one school leader and a family of teachers have done amazing work in creating a culture of high quality, real strong expectations from the teachers and the kids, right, in terms of what they've done. And then you go 30 miles away and there's another schoolhouse that is just in disarray.
Mhm.
Um, it's, by the way, and it's not always because, hey, this is a rich and this is a poor school. I've actually seen desperately poor schools that have unbelievably
Yes.
talented teachers and great leadership, right?
Yeah.
And it really comes down to running effective organizations. And there
Mhm.
really isn't a magic pill for that to fix that. I think it just means we have to take leadership seriously, superintendents, principals, school building leaders in general, and then really, the notion of this is a profession. The teaching profession is one that we've got to. This is where teachers, and everything from their unions to their organizations that are advocating for what they're doing, they all have got to be champions for high quality work,
Yeah.
right? The same way lawyers do, the same way real estate, folks do, real estate agents do, the same way doctors do. Those professions bond together to say, no, we're not going to be okay with poor performance. We absolutely want to promote the profession in a way where we're saying, hey, no, show up and do this work in the right way. But that also means, we as a society, but also in our school systems, we've got to start getting better information, better
Yeah.
resources to those folks so they can do their work in a really impactful way.
Mhm.
I think the good news is the rise of the digital resources that we had to
Yeah.
deploy during the pandemic have probably given us new resources to do that. Where we have better information about our students, we can get them resources if they're at home in different ways. We can create different kinds of outreach. We have more tools at our disposal to teach and reach students than ever before. And what the challenge is going to be now is how do we kind of run away from the one size fits all, one best way model and really think about, hey, what works for my community, what works for my school, for my area. So it's a long answer to your question, but I totally get it. I'm really worried about acting like that is a standard challenge across the country. I think it varies deeply based on the schoolhouse.
Mhm. You recently wrote an open letter to new teachers to help get them prepared for the upcoming school year. I mean, so now we're in about a month or two into the new school year. But I want to talk to you a little bit, and I want our listeners to know because I read that actually. I think I read it a couple of times, and I would really love for you to share some of the points that you put in that open letter to teachers getting prepared to go into the new school year. So, talk a little bit about what was in that letter.
Part of what I was trying to do in that is one, just kind of call to the action, right? People who care about this to actually make the case that we've got to be about this conversation. And what I don't want to do is infantilize teachers in this. And so much of the rhetoric and information out there just treats them like kids. But no, these are working professionals who are pros at their work, and many of them are unbelievably wise in what they do. The new teachers, as they're coming in, one of the things you want to make sure you help them understand is, hey, you have choices. There are choices you can make in this work, and the worst thing in the world is to feel like the world is happening to you as opposed to you being an agent in the world, where it's just kind of at the core of some of the kind of healthy psychological work that's out there. And I don't care what you call it. That goes back, literally 100 years. People have said that when you feel like you have more agency, you are more likely to be effective. So I leaned into choices and said, hey, let's make some choices. And the first one is choose to thrive, which means part of thriving is making sure you're taking care of yourself. Making sure because it is not a gift for your students to have a teacher who is burning themselves out, who is not in a healthy place psychologically, physically, and all the rest. So one of the things that we talked about is, yes, you're going to be doing SEL work, social emotional learning work with your kids. Physician heal thyself, right? You got to think about yourself and figure out what are the things you can do in your world and make some choices that make it more likely that you're in a better place. You're more likely to thrive. And sometimes those are hard choices because you got to say no to some things and others.
Mhm.
Second one was the notion of choose to be a difference maker, which is, I think, teachers embracing the idea that they can be the spark that is game changing for kids is really important for them to understand just how important their role can be. When you do studies later in life with adult learners, what you hear from 50-year-old adults who are trying to go back to school, it's the third grade teacher who told them they weren't college material that sticks with them, right? Just little phrases and little comments, and you realize, wow, every little thing you do, you can be a difference maker. And it might sound hokey, it might sound idealistic. No, it's real, and
Yes.
you got to understand that role and see how impactful you can be. And it goes back to that notion. wonderful book called Atomic Habits, which is talking about the little things you do, and in the realization you don't have to do a big new curriculum. Literally reaching out in your class at that morning to meet that student who's in a tough place can absolutely change that student's lives, which might in the long run change their kids' lives and their community's life and all the rest. So again, the idea is be okay, like choose to embrace the role of being a difference maker if you're going to do it. And the third is the notion of choosing to connect, choosing to make sure you are part of a community of practice, make the connections to other professionals and folks within your profession, and really and be a part of advancing that profession. I think we're better together. Right? You don't want to be an island in this. If you want to be a great teacher, you got to build that community. And sometimes that's in your schoolhouse, sometimes that's in your district, sometimes that's across the country. Thankfully, we've got all kinds of networks we can use now, which are really powerful. But there's something powerful about fellowship, right? There's something powerful about being a part of a community of practice.
I remember my younger sister had this teacher at one point, and it was the smallest of things. And I don't remember what grade she was in, but the teacher never said good morning to her. And she hated that class. She felt very unwelcome. She didn't want to be there. She wasn't doing well in that class. And so when I got the phone call from my dad, who was always, because I was already a teacher at that point, said, what do we do? She hates this class. And when I found out why, I'm like, well, it's a simple thing. You just need to have that conversation with the teacher, because the teacher probably didn't even realize that was having the impact on her. But it's just those teeny tiny small things of building those relationships.
I've had direct conversations with teachers and colleagues who've sent some pretty negative, memorable messages. And I've just I'm trying to figure out why you said that. And I swear some of them were like, oh, I thought I was motivating them. It's like you got to understand how different it is when you're talking about people who are in fragile places versus people who are in deeply sustainable places, right? And if you're talking about people who are wealthy from two parent homes, who are told every day they're beautiful, wonderful, talented, and special, and you're coming in and challenging them, that's very different than somebody who's coming from a distressed house, maybe a foster kid who's doesn't think they belong anywhere, and you smack them with that. It's just a different world. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's helping them get some empathy and understand kind of who they're connecting with. Yeah. But part of it is just realizing. I just like raising the bar and saying, listen, you can be a difference maker. Let's focus on the positive. Mm-hmm. What can you do that will be remembered by that kid when they're a young adult, when they're actually mentoring somebody else? Because boy, you hear it later in life. I was at a commencement where the president of Austin Community College asked thousands of graduates, all of them getting their degree that day, how many of you were told you were not college material? And 90% of the hands were up. At some point in their journey, they were told they were not meant to go to college. And what they had to overcome to be able to achieve was just incredibly powerful. So mm-hmm. I think again, there are some people who think, oh, you're just being hokey or idealistic. No. Actually, you have more power than you think. It is parents, they say parents, pastors, teachers, coaches.
Yes.
Right? Parents, pastors, teachers, coaches, the smallest word is going to stay with those folks forever.
Yeah. And kids so badly, even the older students, right? Because I think there's a myth that middle school and high school students don't need as much as elementary, but they really do, because still developmentally, I taught second grade 20 years ago. We're not going to go into years. I try not to ever do that, but a long time ago, those kids are now having kids. We'll just say that much. And I'll never forget when that first group of children that I taught in second grade, so they were 7, I guess at the time, right? We were about 7 in second grade, give or take. I got a phone call from a mom who had tracked me down and said that her child was graduating college. So after I picked myself up off the floor, I thought, wow, I'm really old. These kids are graduating from college now. And she said, I really want you to come. He never stopped talking about you. He never stopped bringing you up. I don't know if he would want to do this without you. And I'm like, are you serious? I haven't seen this child since he was 7, and now he's 22 years old. And I made the trip. He didn't know I was coming. I made the trip. And when I got out of the car, he got out of the car. And the minute that he saw me, he literally broke down. People that are listening, you do have to understand that if you're impacting children and if you're just being that person for them in their life, and he had a great family. He came from a wonderful family. But I was always kind of that soft place for him during the day and just support him and just love on him and let him know that he was special and all these things. And
And by the way, that does not mean you can't be hard on kids, right?
sure.
You can, in fact, when you develop that place of trust with them, you
Yeah.
might be the only one who can be hard on them
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you challenge them in a way other people can't because you've developed the trust. And it really is that, that classic and corny line that they don't care what you know until they know that you care. Like
Right.
once they know that you're there with them, like, okay, now we can go do this.
Yeah.
Like, let's go, we can go on this adventure together.
Yep.
But again, a part of it is just that understanding that teachers have that kind of impact and can have that kind of impact. And
Hmm.
what I really don't want to have happen, and what we don't want to have happen, is for rising teachers who have entered this profession to not deeply connect with that power that they're going to have, and have the noise and the nonsense that's happening all around can dissuade them from kind of staying on that career path and making that larger difference. My daughter Alexandra, who's on a pathway to become a teacher right now. She's in her master's program. She got straight A's in high school, 4.5 GPA. She graduated college summa cum laude, straight A's. I'm a proud parent, so I'm bragging about
Yeah.
it. She was told, I can't even tell you how many times, you're too smart to be a teacher.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that. And there, I mean, as a father, I want to go strangle a person who says that. Like, and we're talking counselors who are supposed to be higher ed counselors. We're talking people in the university saying that. If that is the rhetoric that is going out to our best and brightest, like we have major intervention conversation we need to have around this. And by the way, this story is not unique. This version of the story, like every time I tell the story, 10 people tell me the similar story coming up. We have to stop that. We have to really, in this country, make the case that this is a profession that matters in a big way. We've got to focus on policy and pay and infrastructure and everything we can do to help these teachers do incredibly well. But we've got to understand the power these folks have and the kind of difference they can make. Absolutely hold them accountable to be the best professionals they can be, and they should really be a part of a community of practice that really drives that. And this is the equivalent of the harvest, right? If you don't get the seed corn right, like forget your harvest later on. This is getting the early part of your economy, your healthcare, your civic, civic engagement all falls apart when education falls apart.
Mm-hmm. So there's something that I heard you say in another presentation or seminar or workshop that you gave, and I don't remember where it was or how many years ago, but you talked about how we're diving in deep to the data and we're giving the data to the wrong people, right? We're pushing all of this data to the wrong people in the game of education. And that made me think of that when you were speaking about teachers being themselves in the classroom and embracing being a teacher and having some ownership in the classroom. Do you think that we're putting way too much pressure as far as state, federal, testing, data, all of these expectations, and we're kind of forgetting about where that is really the most important?
So it's a really important question. I think I'm a big believer in what I call the four rights. You got to build the right infrastructure to get the right data to the right people in the right way. And we have been focused on getting data to accountability systems, to board and to state offices and to the feds, which, by the way, I get it. I mean, they are fiduciaries. They are trying to make sure money is well spent and systems are well structured. That's a thing. You've got to be able to have that. So it's not that they're the wrong people. It's like they're not enough. Like you then have to focus the data as well on the front lines, which is, can we get the data to administrators, to teachers, and to students so they can navigate their own learning? And that's a whole different. And what's great is in the consumer world, we're actually seeing this, right? Where you have this deep interactivity between your own data and your own interaction. And then we're seeing it in healthcare now with the My Chart initiatives and even the Fitbits, where people have their own data and they can guide, this and interact with the system in a different way. Education is pretty late to the game, but they're starting to get there. We're starting to get data to advisors, get data to faculty members, get data to the people who are trying to design curriculum to help make sure we're designing really good stuff. And that move, I think, is going to be game changing because those are the professionals who can make the biggest difference. Let me give you a basic example. I often say teachers and faculty in higher ed and in K-12 are often like battlefield surgeons. Why I say that is they're highly trained professionals in often very noisy and low information environments. In fact, when that battlefield surgeon comes up on a hurt soldier, they have no idea who that soldier is, what their background is. All they know is they see what's in front of them. They try to solve it. And those people often are operating in those low information environments and never see the outcomes of their work. They work on that soldier for a second and they leave, and that's the last time they ever see him. That's how many of our teachers work, how they operate. They walk in and they barely get a class list that's right. Right? They have no data on their students whatsoever. And what breaks your heart about that is every teacher out there is just like a doctor. Every doctor would rather have, they want the chart. Like, who
Yeah.
is this patient? What's their background? What are they allergic to? Who else has worked with them? What have they tried? That helps you guide your interaction and your service with those folks. You can actually get something really positive going with that patient. Same thing with the learners is figuring out how we can develop that same kind of thing. Teachers want to have that kind of data to be able to guide their profession, and they want to know, hey, give me the outcome data. What worked and what didn't?
Yeah.
Well, I can be a student success scientist, right? And if I'm a student success scientist, I'm going to test and try and see what's going on. Our challenge right now is we spend so much time on data for accountability. We don't get data to the front lines. And guess what's going to change the accountability outcomes? Getting data to the front lines and trusting the professionals. That's why I said, we often treat, highly trained professionals like faculty and teachers like kids.
Mm-hmm.
They need the data. When they have the data, when you turn the lights on, it's a lot easier to bowl, right?
Yeah.
And the idea is like, let's give them the data in a way where and then start thinking about the way they get the data so they can really guide it and give it to the students too.
Mm-hmm.
So the students, and you have to make sure you figure it out, the privacy and the structure and the way you're going to present the data, all kinds of specific ethical, but especially kind of like the kinds of data that's going to help them make better choices. And there's some good stories about that. But when you do it, you can just see what a difference it makes. And we already see it, in our own kind of My Chart initiatives and the Fitbit data that people are now kind of addicted to in terms of like understanding how it can help guide their own health.
Yeah. All right. So to wrap up, there's a couple of different groups listening. So you have teachers that are new to the profession and they're still kind of like excited and they're in there and they're doing the work and, they don't want to have, issues or challenges or burnout. But then there's also veteran teachers, seasoned teachers who have been doing this and they really are in the place of maybe considering leaving the profession or doing something else, or maybe they're already, kind of one foot out the door. So what is some really good, solid advice or strategies or things that they can really apply to themselves while they're going through this school year to sort of make this an easier year for them as far as mental health, physical health, teacher burnout, and really just still, like what you said, embracing what they're doing?
Yeah, I would go back to that. The choices people are making in terms of choosing to thrive, choosing to embrace the role of making a difference, and choosing to connect. And part of that connecting is not. It's not just about being in the faculty lounge. Connecting is really about like challenging yourself to keep learning. There's something healing about learning. There's something energizing about learning. And one of the things we can do is kind of learn together about how we can help our students be successful and understand what works and what doesn't. In the book Practical Magic, one of the things I loved is we had a faculty member who told us, you realize that great teachers are purveyors of the case method. I'm like, case? What do you mean by that? And he goes, it means copy and steal everything. Right? When other people do it well, you want to bring it in and figure out how you can use it. And that is part of the need for the community of practice, because when you get more resources together, you can figure out how to work your art. By the way, that's how any artisan develops, right?
Mm-hmm.
You work your craft by seeing other artisans do their work and you kind
Right.
of pull that together. There's something inspiring about building those connections and kind of pulling that together. And there's nothing easy about it because you do have a day job, right? Trying to work with your students, but those connections can be inspiring and be helpful as you're kind of driving forward. And then keep the main thing, which is really focus on working, getting to know those students, and really helping those students progress and kind of understanding what's working and what's not, and just figure out the way you can create a healthier learning environment for yourself. And some of this, and I know you get this in your bones because you've been a professional like me for a while, is the people you surround yourself with really matter.
Mm-hmm.
Messages you're flooded with every day really matter. Make sure you're putting some good stuff in, right? It's garbage in, garbage out. Make sure you are surrounding yourself with people who are motivated and excited about this road ahead. If you are just overwhelmed by people who are negative about the profession, guess what you're going to end up being, right?
Yeah.
You got to search those folks out and find those mentors, find those near peers. It's going to make stuff work.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mark, thank you so much for being with us. This has been a great conversation. Will you please let our audience know where they can find you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on obviously on LinkedIn. I'm at Mark Milliron for Twitter. So if you want to connect that way, more than glad to continue the conversation. What's great is in the kind of work I do is people are not shy about telling me and giving me what I love is the good examples of what people are doing in this kind of area and learning more. So feel free to reach out and connect. I'd love to learn more from you.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it.
Good stuff.
And this is Kristy Houle signing out for this episode of the Classroom Matters podcast. And don't forget to check out all of our great resources on the Educate.Today website.